For this, the first of the 7 reasons why Edward de Vere was not the author of the works of Shakespeare, according to Oxfraud, we actually have 3 claims in one. Shakespeare is not Oxford's pseudonym. No one suggested the canon was written by someone else at the time, and there wasn't even a hint that Shakespeare might be a pen name. Let's start with the claim that Shakespeare is not Oxford's pseudonym. Now, I'm not going to claim that it is, only that based on evidence, it's not unreasonable to suppose it could have been. Oxfraud is stating unambiguously that it wasn't. And, as with all my videos, what anyone claims without evidence, I will reject without evidence. And thank you, Christopher Hitchens, for that piece of clear thinking. So, what do we have? Here's a piece of evidence to show it's not unreasonable to think that Edward de Vere used the pseudonym Shakespeare. Again, I'm not saying he did, but Oxfraud claims he definitely didn't. Thy countenance shakes a spear, says Gabriel Harvey, who was an English writer and notable scholar. Couple that with one of Edward de Vere's titles being Lord Bolbec, whose crest is a lion shaking a spear, or a lance. Do those slides prove that de Vere used Shakespeare as a pseudonym? Of course not, but it is suggestive he might have done, and it's evidence that Oxfraud dismisses out of hand. The second of the 3 claims is, there is no credible evidence that anyone from Shakespeare's time suggested that the canon was written by anyone other than William Shakespeare. So, Oxfraud is saying that because there is no evidence he didn't write the works, he must have written them. Slightly suspicious logic there, I think, but let's go on to the third part of the first reason. Nor did anyone express an opinion or even hint that the name Shakespeare might be a pen name. Here I suggest that viewers read this book by Brian Wildenthal that lists over 30 early doubts about the authorship, some from the time when Shakespeare from Stratford was alive. I'll touch on a few. Let's start with the sonnets. Shake-spear on this one. To the only begetter of these ensuing sonnets, Mr. W.H., probably William Herbert, Earl of Pembroke, all happiness and that eternity promised by our ever-living poet. Ever-living means dead. The sonnets were published in 1609, and Shakespeare from Stratford died in 1616, so it's hard to reconcile an ever-living person, meaning dead, with somebody who is alive. Then we have John Benson's 1640 publication of Shakespeare's poems. This shadow is renowned Shakespeare's, ? Soul of the age, the applause, ? Delight, ? And I wish Oxfraud had a good explanation for this evidence. 1628, in the 3rd edition by Thomas Vickers of his Manual of Rhetoric, he adds something that wasn't in the first 2 editions. To these, I think, should be added that well-known poet who takes his name from the shaking and spear. But there's more. Oxfraud goes on to say, even if an aristocrat did not wish to put his name on plays for the professional theatre, though at least one earl did publish a play under his own name, Oxford can have had no possible reason for withholding his name when publishing Venus and Adonis and The Rape of Lucrece, the first fruits, in actual fact the statement is first fruit, but they say first fruits, of his invention. The success and quality of these poems could have secured the return to court and favour he was so earnestly and unsuccessfully seeking by other means. Now here Oxfraud has chosen to deliberately ignore what is known as the stigma of print. Tudor aristocrats avoided at all costs giving the appearance of earning money for professional work. It simply wasn't done. That was the province of the commercial class, and earning money by writing was viewed as a professional activity. It was perfectly acceptable and encouraged to write and circulate manuscripts among friends, but never for money. The stigma of print, therefore, affected what the aristocrat wrote and whether it was published. As the anonymous author of The Art of English Poesy, 1589, stated, "I know very many notable gentlemen in the court that have written commendably and suppressed it, or else suffered, meaning allowed, it to be published without their own names to it, as if it were a discredit for a gentleman to seem learned and to show himself amorous of any good art." So to summarise the first of my responses to Oxfraud's claim that Edward de Vere was not the author, I have shown with evidence 4 things. 1. That one can reasonably assume that Shakespeare might have been his pseudonym. 2. That because no one said Shakespeare from Stratford wasn't the author, then he must have been the author, is false logic. 3. There have been many doubts about authorship, some of which began when the man from Stratford was alive. 4. The stigma of print would have been a very good reason for anonymity. In fact, it's been suggested that up to 80% of works published in Tudor times were anonymous or pseudonymous. In my next video, I will address Oxfraud claim number 2, Edward de Vere was dead when many of the plays were written.